This is Gary, and Gary has a reasonably successful podcast on economics. And I just wanted to go through this video to explain to you how this guy just doesn't have a fucking clue what he's talking about. And one of the things when I was kind of looking over his channel, because this was the first video I ever saw of it that I find quite strange, is when I first saw Gary, he looked to me like someone who's on benefits, basically. He looks like he lives in social housing. He seems to have either some kind of chromosomal abnormality or perhaps, maybe a slight bit of fetal alcohol syndrome. But, he looks poor. But at the same time, he said, I used to be a trader and I made millions of pounds. And so I'm kind of confused at the image he's putting across. Like in his older videos, he had sort of better, more expensive setups, it seems. Whereas now he's just basically doing these podcasts from his kitchen where, he looks very poor but is also apparently a millionaire. So, yeah, let's dive into this. I mean, there's a couple of things where he's kind of, I would say we have some slight agreement, but overall, I just think this video is so bad, and I don't understand why he gets so many views. So, let's dive on in. Now, I've turned Gary's voice off because it's annoying, and I'm just going to talk over him as he goes on and stop him at some points when I think he's made a bit of an error. Right. This phrase that is constantly used by people on the left, that Elon Musk is intervening in UK politics, is a classic Russell's paradox phrase, when a more correct way of pointing out what Elon Musk did was he put out a tweet about rape gangs in the UK. And that simply, while it had an indirect effect on UK politics in that people then started talking about it, this is not in any way an intervention into UK politics. He didn't sneak into Buckingham Palace and then dissolve Parliament. So just, just shut your fucking mouth. The comments and tweets from British politicians about Trump were endless when he was in the run-up to the first 2016, when he was president, in the next run-up, in the next election. So basically, Elon Musk is allowed to tweet on his own site, and that is not interfering in UK politics. Just because it has a negative effect that you find to be negative does not mean it's any way intervening. He's literally just using his own site. Gary seems to have an incredibly zero sum mentality when it comes to the economy that I really am not sure about. I mean, there's like the tiniest bit of truth in this, in that, for example, some super rich foreigners start coming into the London housing market and buying a few homes. Now, that will have some impact, but it still is a couple of top end homes, and in the total housing market, it's a drop in the ocean. And so, what you're going to find is that, if you look at the record of house prices in England, it's quite obvious that they started going completely mental around 1997, which is, when essentially the open borders experiment began. And while it is the case that, billionaires will use more of certain resources, like Gary, in a minute, he'll say, oh, your food bill's going up because of billionaires. And it's like, Gary, how does that work? How much food do you think these people eat? You're retarded. The major thing that causes a limit on the number of doctors in the UK is not the existence of billionaires who probably undoubtedly would not use the NHS. They'll all fly over to America to get their treatment, I'm pretty sure. Is that the British Medical Association caps the number of doctors that can be trained each year. If you remove that cap, you can train more doctors and then there'll be more doctors. It's that simple. I mean, it's always been the case that, especially with a large financial centre like London, most of what you might call the CBI would be full of things like luxury hotels and restaurants and, the exchange. Most people aren't going to live around there. The other thing Gary doesn't seem to think about is currently who might be filling some of those hotels at the moment, because it probably won't be billionaires, it will probably be a random migrant. Now, I want to sort of deal with what I think, from the UK perspective, is the major flaw with Gary's argument. I want to leave Larry Fink and BlackRock out of it. But you'll notice, like, if you watch the whole video, that he talks about billionaires. He mentions Elon Musk several times. He doesn't name any other billionaires, which you do kind of wonder why all the focus is on Musk. He may be the world's richest person, but stood next to BlackRock with their, literal trillions and trillions, he he isn't actually that much of an influence in terms of He's got the personal wealth, but he doesn't control that massive amount. Larry Fink has way more influence in the financial world than Elon Musk does. But Gary doesn't mention BlackRock or Larry Fink once. And once you've moved sort of, say, like Larry to the side, if you take a look at billionaires in the UK, and I think because Gary's very unspecific. He just says, tax the billionaires, then there's going to be less equality and the economy is going to be better. He doesn't say exactly how much he how he's going to tax them, what tax specifically he wants to raise, how much he expects this to bring in. Well, I'm going to go a little bit further than Gary, and I'm not going to tax the billionaires. I'm going to go full Lenin on them. Now, based on the view, so I'd say at a kind of estimate from looking at the figures earlier, there's like 165 billionaires in the UK, probably have a total net worth of around £1 trillion. But what you'll find very quickly when you look at these billionaires is most of them are non-doms. Now, what this means is, say for something like the richest guy in England, Now there's the richest guy in England. He's got a net worth of just under £40 billion. But the thing is, when someone like Gary sees that 40 billion and they think, oh yeah, we can tax that, is where you can't, because most of it is in other countries. How are you ever gonna get your hands on it? Even if you go if you Abramovich the guy, the best you can do is freeze all his assets in the UK. I don't have an answer for this, but if you've got a company that is spread across 48 different countries, where you should be paying the tax is quite a complicated question. But the reality is, even if you go full there, I think if you went full let in on the the 165 billionaires in the UK, you'd probably raise maybe £750 billion. And £750 billion sounds like a lot of money, but the reality is, if you try and solve inequality in the UK with that £75 billion, I don't think you're going to get very far. And the reason for this is, I meant to say £750 billion. If you took that £750 billion and divided it amongst the 70 million people in the UK, that's about 10 grand each. And, that would be nice, but it's not actually going to make that much of a difference to your life. It really isn't. You can't solve inequality. I mean, with that amount of money, it's not enough. You can argue about the morality of non-dom status, or whether or not you think it's a good or a bad idea. But what you can't say is, oh, we just need to tax these people a bit more, and then we're going to have fully automated luxury communism, because that is a complete pipe dream. Now, if I was the Chancellor and I received this 750 billion windfall, I don't think that just handing it out to people is the most prudent way of spending it. My choice would be to pay off part of the national debt, which currently stands at 2.8 trillion. So you'd probably be able to knock that down to about 2 trillion. And then you'd probably knock maybe a third off the interest payments, which would save us about 30 billion a year, I guess. So what I want Gary to think about is, if tomorrow Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves decided that they were going to literally liquefy the billionaire class, take all the money that they could get their hands on, and then spend it prudently, the average person in the street wouldn't even notice. there would be no immediate difference to their lives. Now, it would benefit them a little bit in the future, depending on whatever the other negative impacts of you murdering all the billionaires might be. You might see that the millionaire outflow that we currently have would increase a little bit, maybe. I don't know, but this is the emptiness of Gary's view, and the emptiness of talking about economics and never ever mentioning a figure. He does mention a couple of figures later, but as we'll see, he gets them wrong. So, that's my main point to Gary is even that 750 billion isn't going to get us out of this mess. And the problem, I simply cannot see how, like, an example of like a non-dom is Roman Abramovich. Now, you can argue about the morality of how this guy came about his money, but from the UK economy perspective, he was nothing but a benefit. This guy was super benefit. Like, he bankrolled Chelsea. So that's now, that's like, the wage bill would be putting like 600, 700 grand a week into the exchequer. And, you have what is a crazy situation where, people who basically pay no tax whatsoever look at people who are already paying millions of pounds worth of tax and say, oh yeah, you should be paying more. And for a lot of people, that just doesn't fly. But the point, I really want to put that point in again. You can argue about the morality of certain levels of inequality. What you can't argue is that we, somehow we can just like add a little tax on the billionaires and then everything is going to be economically fine. It won't. That's just economic illiteracy. Now, when I was applying for university, London School of Economics was one of the ones I applied to, and they turned me down. I don't feel any animosity about that. I just laugh at it as an institution. Gary, this is why I don't want money in public hands, because LSE has a budget of £500 million a year, and they produce idiots like you that just, you're just a fucking moron. You don't understand economics. You're about to say you get good grades. Well, what the fuck does that mean? Everyone, I can't even. I mean, something else that Gary doesn't talk about, because he's obviously interested in finding big, large piles of cash that the government can tax. Well, here's some news for you, Gary. Just like Friedrich Engels before them, your Marxist lecturers at the LSE have no problem with taking money from the University Superannuation Fund, which is the largest pension fund in the UK. About £60 billion. And, in the case of billionaires, that's, it's spread out in the world. Most of the money is in America, but you could quite easily, if you're Keir Starmer or you're the Prime Minister, you could quite easily put pressure on those, particularly the University Pension Fund and the BBC Pension Fund, say, right, boys, instead of 7% in the FTSE and 90% in the S&P because you get better returns, how about being a little bit more patriotic and putting a little bit more of that money in the FTSE? And then what you're going to get is a massive boost to the stock market without hurting anyone. Really, if a few university lecturers and a few people from the BBC end up with slightly less in their pension pot, that's just another fucking bonus, isn't it? From the look of you, Gary, I really doubt that you were ever earning £1 million a year. I mean, from the look of your house, from the look of your clothes, you look poor as fuck. So you're either lying or you're deliberately putting across this image of being poor so more people donate to your Patreon, but you're already a millionaire. But you're all about equality. Tell me how that works. Now, what Gary says here in terms of the kind of revolving door between sort of private sector, public sector, there's some, there is something there. I think sometimes people do wonder about where the motivation is. But in a way, this is an argument for it's an I wouldn't have any problem with politicians like the British Prime Minister being paid £1 million a year. It's easily £1 million a year job. You might get more quality candidates then, but it is also for someone like Trump, someone like Musk in UK, Rupert Lowe is a good example. These people are already wealthy, and that if you're already wealthy, you're much less likely to be corruptible by money. A lot of the time, Gary knows exactly what all the millionaires want. They just want to get richer. They just always want to get richer. If Rupert Lowe just wanted to get richer, he wouldn't give his MP salary away. He'd take it and he'd put it in the bank, but he doesn't. He gives it away to charity. I don't think everyone who's rich has the max, I've got to be the richest mentality. I think some people, when they do get to the point when they're living off the interest of the interest, they kind of realize they've got enough, and it's not something that bothers them so much anymore. But but once again, what we're going to see here is that Gary gets his figures a bit wrong. Now, Cameron's salary at Greensill was actually about £1 million a year. I mean, he was paid obviously very, very well for not doing a lot of work. But then it's also worth noting that most of that, the 10 million that he made over 2.5 years, came from him selling shares in 2019 at a 4.5 million profit. So, I mean, I'd be pretty happy with that as a trade. So maybe he's not bad. I hate to break it to you, Gary, but the Elon Musk, sorry, not Elon Musk, Rishi Sunak's father-in-law is Indian, and he's based in India. And I don't know, once upon a time, maybe the British Prime Minister, could have laid some taxes on him, could have told him that he wasn't allowed to make salt. But the Raj is over, so I don't know what laws Rishi Sunak would have been making in England that would somehow benefit his father's, financials, which are in India. It's not yours to tax. It's in India. It's just retarded. Yeah, once again, I'm not convinced with that argument. I think there's lots and lots of other things going on there. Do you ever speak to someone from Singapore or Hong Kong? Probably not, because it doesn't fit your argument. This is something, yeah, that I really, really want to take issue with. He's saying here, oh, we haven't had. I'll just draw it back a second. And we haven't had these. Now, it's quite incredible that an economics student from, a Russell Group university has apparently, completely forgotten about the one time that a foreign billionaire did make us all poorer, and that was obviously on Black Wednesday in 1992. And that billionaire is obviously George Soros. Now, one of the reasons I get so irate about left wingers who are now foreign billionaire influence on our politics, now that Musk is doing it, is that for the last 10 years or so, if you'd said anything about the influence of George Soros on politics, the influence of Bill Gates on politics, you basically got told that you were a conspiracy theorist and you needed to shut up and that you were stupid. And, Black Wednesday really was. I remember, living through it and, my parents having a mortgage at the time and interest rates going up to 15%. And, that was one of the sort of essentially poorest times of my life. And, so George Soros basically broke the Bank of England, betting against the pound. About £20 billion of public money was wasted in a day by Norman Lamont. And that, so he's saying, oh, this didn't used to happen. Well, 1992, that's like 33 years ago now. That's a long time ago. It did used to happen. And, the fact is, George Soros just got given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Joe Biden. That pisses me off as someone from the UK a lot more than Elon Musk putting out a tweet, you fucking stupid cunt. And it's also worth pointing out that Soros and his son Alex regularly have meetings with people like Nancy Pelosi, David Lammy, even though they're Hungarian, so they're foreign both to US and UK. But apparently that influence has never bothered anyone on the left. Now, some of the things that Gary's saying about journalism here are, there is certainly a level of truth to that. But what I would also say is, look at the BBC. It's not a private corporation. It's got plenty of money, and as he puts out here, saying, oh, American media is really biased. Well, a lot of people would tell you that the BBC is very biased. So I don't think, if a public corporation suffers from the same problems as a private one, there's something else going on there. I want you to focus on what Gary's about to say here because it's particularly retarded. No, it didn't, Gary. It went up 31%. It's not doubled. It went up 31%. That's an easy figure for you to go and check. You know, you said as soon as. It hasn't quite doubled. It's kind of almost doubled in that time. But it didn't double as soon as. You effing moron. Now, the reason the Tesla share price went up 30% when Donald Trump won the election is not because people think that Donald Trump is simply going to hand over taxpayers' cash directly to Tesla, you fucking twat. The reason is because it's now going to be in a better, regulatory environment. The Democrats are going to stop giving contracts to other people when Tesla were obviously the way to go, that sort of thing. So that's why it rose by 30%. And also, what's the point if what you're saying was true, Gary? What would be the point in taxing billionaires if the politicians are just going to give that tax money back to the billionaires? You're in a loop circle there where you can't get out, and you're just talking shit. Whether you say the economy got better, the economy got worse, it's not really very descriptive. But we can see that actually UK GDP growth was 1.1 in 2011, 1.5 in 2012, 1.8 in 2013, 3.2 in 2014, 2.2 in 2015, 1.9 in 2016, 2.7 in 2017, 1.4 in 2018, 1.6 in 2019 up until COVID. That isn't getting worse, Gary. Now, it might not be improving living standards if you're also pumping the country full of people, so many people that the GDP per capita is going down. But, the one, in terms of the overall economy, GDP growth would be what you'd use to say, is it getting bigger, is it getting smaller? So basically just talking shit again. It did. It did. He's like, there's something I want to discuss here, but some of this is just so vague. It's so vague. What you're kind of seeing in that sort of word soup that Gary gave us there is the left trying to come to terms with the fact that they now know they're losing, and they're losing pretty badly, and they need to do something to turn it around. Um, once again, there it is. Oh, you just need to tax them more. How much more? How much is it going to bring in? There's just nothing there, Gary. You're a fucking idiot. Now, I just want to point out here that there isn't really an economic aspect to the grooming gang story. I mean, what people are upset about is not the money. Um, if you watch what Gary says here, it's pretty much tantamount to a thinly veiled threat. Once again, I'm not 100% on this. People, they say, "Oh, the rich." There, I mean, I'm pretty sure there comes to a point where you've got enough money, and what you really want is power. And a lot of what we're seeing right now is essentially intra elite competition, where you've got kind of Musk and Thiel and the PayPal mafia in one corner, and perhaps other billionaires, Soros, etc. And other, obviously you've got globalist faction, Zionist faction, all that sort of stuff. But I don't want to get too much into is Trump containment and all that sort of stuff in this video. I just want to point out that I think Gary's a fucking idiot. Once again, it's just complete zero sum. Which is not how economies work. And one of the interesting things, as we point out, when Tesla is one of the most traded stocks, when they go up 30%, it's not just Elon Musk making money, it's anyone who owns a Tesla share. And anyone can own a Tesla share. So, considering how fucking obvious it was that Tesla was going to go up when Donald Trump won, it was just easy money for anyone to make. I mean, I wish I'd had an eToro account open then. I would have made bank, but I didn't, and I missed out. But unlike Gary, I try not to engage in the politics of envy. once again, I'm going to point out to Gary that the point about the grooming gang scandal was all the rape and the torture, not that they were making people poorer. Um, so you're just completely off base on that once again. Oh, sorry. This is the thinly veiled threat. This is where it is. I think that if you went to most of the CEOs in America and said, "Hey guys, I'm gonna do you I'm gonna cut some of your taxes." Now, if what Gary says is correct, they'll always go for this. But if you would then say, yeah, the way I'm going to fund this tax cut is by cancelling all future military and diplomatic support to Israel, I reckon they'd be happy paying that tax. Just, just a hunch. Once again, some of what Gary is saying is correct here. Obviously, it is very much in the interest of large corporations to have lots of cheap labour. But labour, like everything else, is subject to laws of supply and demand. Oh, this is. I mean, I don't think it's the smartest thing they ever did, Gary. I think long term, the Conservative Party are really, really going to regret that decision. It maybe gave a small economic boost for a small amount of time, but ultimately it is going to destroy their party. So I don't think it was that smart. It wasn't super smart, Gary. You know, they lied, Gary. They lied. And it's going to cost them in the future. You know, once again, that describing of the billionaires is completely underestimates the potential of intra-elite competition. They don't necessarily, you know, they compete against each other. They don't necessarily have this one unified mindset. Um, you know, once again, he's been talking about Elon Musk, Elon Musk, Elon Musk, didn't mention a single other billionaire by name during the whole video. Once again, you know, zero sum economics. What we're kind of seeing here is now that the woke has been put away, is kind of essentially a sort of return by the left to classic, you know, old school kind of class communism, I sort of way of looking at things. Um, but you know, I really don't think that's going to be much of a sell nowadays, and I don't think it's going to be much of a sell to most Zoomers. I think there'll definitely be a contingent of them that'll go for it, but I think there's a lot of very entrepreneurial Zoomers who will not, you know, like the sound of this at all. You know, you need to buy some assets, and you can because you can buy shares easily. The problem in the UK is everyone puts their money into houses when they should be putting their money into equities. I really don't think that is what he wants. And then, you know, yeah, oh, this is just classic. You know, certainly modern capitalism isn't perfect. But if you are suggesting some kind of radical overhaul of the world's entire financial system, you maybe want to have something a little bit more detailed than you need to change the game. Crappy little cliche from, you know, fuck the London School of Economics. Fuck those Fabian fuckwits. Half a billion pounds a year to fund that university, and this is the sort of moron you produce who ends up on my fucking YouTube screen. That is why I fucking hate you, stupid Fabian wankers. Just, you know, if you need money, take it out of the university superannuation fund. And if there's not enough there, then go and take the 15 billion from the BBC pension fund. If you need some money, that's where you go to get it. Everyone who bought Tesla shares this year won. Everyone who bought Tesla shares this year won. Buy some Tesla shares. I sincerely doubt there is a member of the poor community, poor working class community in Rotherham that would want to work with certain people in their community against Elon Musk. Because whatever you might suggest Elon Musk did to them, the people from their, you know, other members of their community did something a lot worse, Gary. And, you know, this is something else I want to point out to the left, is that the Britain of 2025 is not the Britain of the Beveridge Report. Okay? It's just not. And I think, you know, personally, you know, what the welfare state is about this year the government will spend about just over £1 trillion, probably like £1.1 trillion, and 2/3 of that is the welfare state. So, you know, you say, like Gary says, you know, everything's orientated towards the billionaires. For me personally, I'd love to see the back of the welfare state. I think it's would be the best thing that Britain could ever do. The years, you know, the welfare state was, born in, around 45. And if you look at, if you want to look at the high points of British history, none of them have been since then. Oh, Gary. What a fucking cretin. Yeah, I think I'm done now.